Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Suzanne Harris. Thank you so much for joining us today. On our podcast, we like to talk to the authors about themselves. We also talk about their books, and we talk about their ideas. Joining me today is Gene ABEL, and if you have listened to this podcast for any period of time, you recognize that name. He is a prolific, wonderful author, and it's always a pleasure to talk to him. And today, he's here to talk about his book, The Aliens Step In, Book 3 in the Defenders of Time series. Now, Gene's background is very interesting. He's a distinguished military graduate from Penn State University with a degree in finance, and he also has an MBA from Lehigh University. He started his active military service at the completion of his graduate degree at Lehigh. He was promoted to colonel. He completed the Army War College, and he was nominated for general. He received the Army Commendation Medal and the Meritorious Service Medal twice. Gene's also worked as a nuclear weapons officer in the artillery branch of the Army. He served as an Army finance officer, and he has 30 years of service as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army and Army Reserve. Gene, thank you so much for your service. You're
very welcome.
He's also been a highly successful business executive in both the public and the private sector, and he's a genuine entrepreneur. It is always so much fun to talk to you, and I'm so glad you're back. Welcome, Gene.
Thank you.
You know, we've talked about several books that you've done. You've done science fiction, you've written a romance novel, which always surprises me. Today we're talking about the third book in the Defenders of Time trilogy. The first one was titled Going Back, and the second one was titled Kidnappers from the Future. If you could, let's go back and bring our listeners up to speed. Let's give them just a brief synopsis of the action of the first two books so that they'll have a perspective of what's happening here in Book 3.
Okay, I'm going back.
Okay, going back in time. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
And that is the title of book number 1 in the trilogy. Book number 1, Going Back, is a scenario where the United States has finally developed the ability to travel in time. They have also determined that they can actually detect when others go back. And they've come to the conclusion that going back, changing history, could produce something worse than the reality that we experience. So the idea is that the United States would monitor anyone going back in time and try to prevent any changes in time. So going back, the American team detects that others have gone back with the suspicion that they're going to try to change something. They go back to New York in 1919, and so our team immediately goes back and finds that, yes, both the Germans and the Japanese have gone back to make some changes in history. The Japanese want to prevent the humiliation of Pearl Harbor, and the Germans, unfortunately, want to win the war. The team goes through a lot of exciting chase scenes and finally is successful in stopping both both Japan and Germany from changing history and return to the present, everything the same. Now, in the second book, Kidnappers from the Future, we take a little different approach. Something that we did in our time had an adverse impact on Russia in the future. And what we find is that the Russians in the future, about 100 years in advance, come back to our time because they want to change something that we did so that it didn't adversely impact their country. They kidnap one of our key scientists, take her to the future. Our team, of course, detects this and for the first time makes a trip forward in time to try to rescue our scientists and prevent the Russians from changing history. This one has a lot of exciting twists. It shows the world 100 years into the future, as I saw it. And eventually, again, our heroes return with Samantha, who is the scientist, and puts everything back to where it should be and no change in history. So that's the lead-in for the first two books. Then we switch to the book that we're talking about today, which is The Aliens Step In. Now, in this book, it begins as strictly a time travel scenario. This time I pick on the Chinese. And the way the book begins is, in my earlier series, the underground facilities of our time travel organization are protected from changes in history for a brief period of time. So if someone were successful and go back and change history, it would not immediately impact the protected travel chamber in underground. However, that did not also go to anything above ground. All of a sudden, everything that was part of the time travel facility above ground disappeared. And the suspicion is that somebody has gone back and made a change in history to eliminate our time travel operation, which is exactly what has happened. This then produces another trip back to the past, again, by our heroes, to try and see whether they can reverse the change in history that the Chinese accomplished. When they do this, they produce a catastrophic event that goes beyond Earth into the greater universe. And it is that event and that dramatic consequence that brings the aliens to make direct contact. And from then it goes in a scenario where they tell us, you cannot keep doing this, it's dangerous. They decide to take us to their planet and visit their leader, who makes us an offer of a gift. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the gift is. You have to read the book.
Good.
But the gift that they offer would change our life, but not change our history. So that's the scenario of the three time travel books in the Defenders of Time trilogy, in a nutshell.
Gene, where in the world did you get the idea to start this book? I mean, I love what you've done. I love the three books. It just your imagination amazes me. Where did this all come from originally?
Well, I always have been interested in sci-fi, and time travel has been a topic of discussion. Believe it or not, there's some actual scientific foundation for the ability to travel in time. Hawkins thought so. Einstein thought so. I'm not nearly intelligent enough to really understand what they said, but they did have a conceptual idea that mathematically it may be possible. So that was where my interest came. Now, the reason I introduced in the third book the alien theme is that I have also written a documentary called What If Anything Is Out There? And this is a book that takes an honest look at the factually of all of the sightings, or many of the sightings, I won't say all of them, but many of the sightings of UFOs over the years. And so it was a natural for me to take what I learned in that research and writing that book, and I decided to incorporate that into the third book, so that it's really a transition now from strictly a time travel scenario to a direct alien contact, which again is the subject of What If Anything Is Out There.
You have your finger right on the pulse of what's happening. I mean, I'm sure all of our listeners have seen on the news in the not too distant past, I mean, just several weeks ago, information where the government came out and actually said, there's stuff out there, we don't know what it is. And so I think that these two books, really, you're just right on target with what's going on in the news, as it were. And we keep expecting, of course, more and more and more information. And I really like what you're doing. I know that you're going to update What If Anything Is Out There. Is that right?
Well, we are looking at that. I'm looking at that with my publisher. There's a lot of additional information that I've researched. We would like to expand the book. We'll change the title most likely and expand the subject matter. And I really do believe that yes, anyone that doesn't think there's a reasonable possibility that we're not alone, I think has not really looked into it too carefully. But they always say timing is everything.
Right.
So I said to my publisher, if we're going to do this, we better hurry up because we don't want them to land before we publish the book. It'll be.
I love it. I love it. The other thing that I really like about what you've done with this trilogy is I started to read the very beginning, and I was very surprised it starts with a wedding. I thought, wait, what? Where did you get that idea to start it with a wedding?
Well, if you follow through the series, there are characters that have been from book one, and then there's others that were added in 2 and in 3. But basically, the characters mature and flow through the 3 books. And it's a little like if you remember Dallas, the TV series, where you had all the characters and some people fixated on one or the other. They loved some, they hated others.
Right.
Well, people that have read my book have linked on to certain characters, like Claire, who is the reporter that began in book 1. She has developed. And so what I have in the book, in addition to the sci-fi motif, is I have 2 very, very brief romantic things. First was Claire and Ben Stein, who's the historian, and then one that really hasn't, or just beginning to develop, between the guy that's really the CIA guy in the Alien Step In, Hesman, and he's in the other series as well, and the scientist that was captured in the second book. So what you saw in that first chapter of the Alien Step In is sort of the culmination of the romantic interlude between Claire, the reporter, and the historian. So it just added, I think, a little something different, so that it wasn't just sci-fi, but it is principally that. But I did introduce just a twinkling of these 2 romantic entanglements.
Well, I love the way that you described the scenario. I mean, to me, what you've done with that is you've brought this to exactly what you said. We see a little romance there at the beginning, and you've written it so well. It's just so clear. The scene is just wonderfully done. And I love the description of what you said, but there's this, if we could hear it in a book, in the background, there's this da-da-da. You can sort of hear the music that's playing in your head, that this is not what it seems. Something is about to happen. I mean, it's just very well done. I really liked what you did with that. We've kind of rambled on and on and on about the 3rd book. Is there a part of it that you'd like to share with the listeners so they can really hear what you've done?
Yeah, and as a lead-in, what I'm going to read is as the aliens make their presence known after the near disaster that we created by trying to return history from the change that the Chinese made. So I'll begin here. What the hell's going on here? He snapped. That was the general that said that. History is back the way it should be, but the fact we aren't responsible is at least disturbing as everything else. Claire seemed unconcerned about Mr. Thomas's mood as she pointed towards the main platform. Maybe he has the answer. All heads turned to the central platform. Standing in the center was a figure unlike anything Hesman had ever seen in his life. Human in general shape, it only stood about 5.5 feet tall, a little more than Lieutenant Posen. He had 6 fingers, webbed toes, large eyes, large flanged ears, a thick mop of hair that looked translucent, like translucent noodles. The strange hair was neatly trimmed to his ears. Whispers sprang from his nose, and its domed head was a little larger than most humans. The creature had bare feet and was gold, and had a golden jumpsuit with a blue cape almost to his ankles. He said, "You must stop all time travel."
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. Now, the people who are listening to us are going, and.
We got to read the book.
Exactly. So let's tell them where to get the book. That's exactly a perfect lead into that. Now, I know it's on Amazon, and if there are some folks in our listening audience who've not done Amazon, let me give you just a little bit of a sort of a tutelage of what to do. Simply put www.amazon.com in your browser and click on it. Amazon will come right up. Now, when I first looked at Amazon, I found that front page very intimidating. I thought, what do I do here? Let me think about this. You'll see a long gray, sort of rectangular search box. In that search box, type the title of the book. Now, let me give you the specific title of the book and do a little bit of spelling. The title of the book we're talking about today is The Aliens, Aliens, Step In. Now, that is book 3 in the Defenders of Time trilogy by Gene, Gene, ABEL, ABEL. Click on
Gene
that.
P.
Say that again.
It's Gene P.
Gene T. They've got the T listed?
T.
Okay, Gene
Yes,
T.
ABEL.
Period, ABEL. That's the third book that we're talking about today. If you're interested in the other 2 books, the first book's title is Going Back. Simply substitute that by Gene T. ABEL, and the second book is Kidnappers from the Future. Now, the chances are good if you put the third title in and click on it that all 3 books will show on the page. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. The good news is that when you click on the Aliens Step In, if you'll look in, as you look at the page, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the words Look Inside. That means that you'll be able to put your cursor on those 2 words, click on it, and the book will electronically open, and you can read this first scene that we're talking about and get a feel for the book and get a feel for the writing. Now, Gene, I know that some of our people who are listening to us don't like to buy from the largest bookseller in the world. They would like to buy from someone else, and I know the book is available several other places. So let's give our listeners some other places that they could get the book.
Well, I think it's on Barnes & Noble, so Simon & Schuster. And the way it's listed now on Amazon, it's a pre-order. The actual release date of the Alien Step In is July the 18th. And if you order the book today, it will put you in a pre-order status, and you will most likely receive the book on the 19th or 20th from Amazon. I don't know if that's the case with the others. The other thing we're doing is the book will be available in bookstores, as it's being distributed by Ingram. So if, for example, you go to your Barnes & Noble or your local bookstore or whatever, I'm not saying they'll have the book in stock, but they can order the book for you from a brick-and-mortar bookstore.
I love that. I love it that you're doing that. Now, you've also done something else that I love. We're going to talk about your website in a moment, but I want us to talk about the video trailers that you've done for each book and for this third book in particular. Tell me a little bit about the trailers and how the listeners could access them.
Okay. If you go to my website, genepabelbooks.com, on the very first page, you will see, right now, you just see Going Back and Kidnappers from the Future. In the next update of that front page, you will see the third book as well, The Aliens Step In, because it's all that same series, The Defenders of Time. You will see centered on that page a little green box. If you click that green box, it will play the video trailer that covers the Defenders of Time series. It covers all 3 books. Now, for my other books, as you click on the actual cover of the books, like What If Anything Is Out There or The Inn of Destiny or whatever have you, it will take you to the book. You can, again, read parts of it. You can take a look at what other readers have said. And each of those books has that little green box, and you simply click on it. And the video trailers are roughly 2.5 to 3.5 minutes long each. They're not long. But I think that, and the other thing that I hope people will take a look at is I'm posting comments from readers who have read the book. I will have some Goodreads comments on there. Each of my books will have had Goodreads comments. I've had comments from Amazon because, as the author, I may think this book is great, but that's not what's really important. What's important is what the people who have read it think. And I'm really very flattered to see especially some of the postings on Goodreads. My book has gotten almost all 5-star ratings, and if they weren't 5, they were 4. And you'll be able to read those comments on my website. And again, it's Gene P. Abel Books, that's plural, .com. And that way you can access any of my books, look at my video trailers, read what people have said, and get a better idea what each book is about.
And they can also read your bio right there and see a picture of you.
Yes. Yes, they do. And I also have in the news section at the top a bunch of video clips that I've made, podcasts like this one, the link to this one and the others that we've done, so that you can also view those if you wish.
Now, you're doing some things on social media. I know you're doing some things on LinkedIn and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. Tell me about those things.
Yes, I have a company that's placing direct ads for my books on those Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, and they focus on each of my books, which they made a small, video ad. We will begin running an ad for the new book, The Aliens Step In about a week before the book is due to be released. So this will I hope really help people get some information about it. I have hired a publicist, and she is working with putting some articles together and publicizing the fact that not only of this book, but of the other books that I've written and what I'm trying to do. One of the other things that we are looking at, I don't know, if this will work out or not, but the 3 sci-fi books flow together into a series that, as I said, begins with us going back and now is with the aliens stepping in. And we're hoping to get the opportunity to see if we can get one of the streaming companies to take a look at the series and maybe try a mini-series of some of these episodes. We're also looking at the possibility of turning these books into a video game. With all the chase scenes and all the action in the books, I've talked with some people that think that there's a real potential here. So we're also taking a look at that as well, although that's probably pretty much down the road a ways, but at least we're looking at it.
This is exactly why I used the word entrepreneurial when I introduced you. You are always looking at different options and different things to do with the characters and the books, and I just think you've got your finger so much on the pulse of what's going on right now. This is just congratulations, first of all. This is such a good book,
Thank you.
And you've done such a good job with the trilogy. I have one last question. And you know this is coming because I always like for the author to have the last word about their book. This is the 3rd book in the series. Is there something that you would like the readers who read all 3 books or even one of the books individually, is there a bottom line message that you really want people to take away from this, from the trilogy and from these books in particular?
Yeah, I think that is that. They're dubbed science fiction. I believe that many of the things that are science fiction are really not fiction at all. They are, in essence, glimpses into the future, things that have not yet happened. You can go back to Jules Verne and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. You can take a look at the Star Trek series. Many of the things that were in there are being done right now. So what I'm saying here is I'm trying to stimulate your imagination and look at maybe these things will happen in the future. And I'm hoping that together with the building of the characters in this series is something that people will latch on to. Now, obviously, to do that, you're going to have to read all 3 books, and it'd be best to read them in the sequence that they were written, because I've tried to have the characters develop and mature as the series goes through the 3 books. And as I said, I know my wife, at one time I had thought about killing off Claire, who is the reporter that came from 1919 to 2019 in the first book. And my wife said, "Don't you dare, I love her." So I thought better of that. Instead, we continued Claire. And so it's that kind of progression I'm hoping people will latch on to. It's that kind of progression I hope the streaming companies may take a look at and say, this is something that trigger some interest. And finally, what I've done in this 3rd book, as I did in Kidnappers from the Future, is I included a lot of illustrations. And I did that not only to help the reader visualize what my storyline is and what I'm saying, but also they become part of the copyright of the book. And who knows, if something really clicks, then you've got things like action figures, posters, and all kinds of merchandising options that could develop from this series. But I'm really, the bottom line is, don't think because it says fiction that it may not happen.
Gene, as always, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you today. I'm so excited for you and all of the different options and the different ideas that you have around this book. I really do think, as I've said a couple of times, you have your finger right on the pulse of what interest is out there and what the future is coming. I just think it's terrific with what you've done. So thank you for being my guest today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Very welcome, and I enjoy speaking with you as well.
Now remember, you can find all 3 of the Defenders of Time trilogy on Amazon. The titles are Going Back, Kidnappers from the Future, and the last one, the book we've talked about today, The Aliens Step In, on Amazon by Gene, Gene, P. ABEL, ABEL. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I so hope that you'll join me for our next Books on Air podcast, because remember, you never know who's going to be here and what, if anything, is out there. Thank you so much for listening.